Uh,
All right. Yes. Hi, Audrey.
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, let me grab my headphones real quick just to make sure that the outside audio is not as bad.
Sounds good.
All right. Casey. In this soon. Hi.
Hello.
All right. I'm gonna invite Casey.
I'm gonna have this nice cell phone
Yay!
thing. Hello.
Yes, we're here.
We're
Hello.
here on time.
Here.
I know. I definitely took like a quick run to the corner store, which is like right across the street to grab a nice little drink, a little pick me up after this. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. Awesome, folks are joining in. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back to my favorite day of the week. It's TOPA Tuesday. For those of you who may be new to this or haven't joined us, this is part 7 of our introductory series to meeting all the different organizers and residents and organizations that are part of the Los Angeles Community Land Trust Coalition. And so today we are joined by members of Beverly-Vermont CLT who've been holding it down in Koreatown since the 2000s. And
I have a shirt.
yeah,
I just have the Bbclt shirt on.
period. I was gonna wear, and honestly, I was so I'm new to like the whole CLT space as to this year, but yesterday when me, Audrey, and Casey were meeting to prep for today's TOPA Tuesday, a lot of things came up that seemed like just sort of like natural extensions of ourselves and how we got here. And so although I didn't know much about the organizational history of Beverly-Vermont, I felt like all of the things we knew were just were iterations of things that we've been through before, and probably things that other folks have gone through. So I'm really happy that we have y'all here to share. Again, for folks who are new, my name is Matthew. I'm with Trust South LA here in South Central. Audrey, Casey, would you like to introduce yourselves to the folks who are joining us?
Sure. I'm on this side on my screen. Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey Jang. I've lived in K-Town my whole life, and I'm board treasurer of the Beverly-Vermont Community Land Trust. BVCLT was founded out of the LA Eco Village. If any of you guys know about the LA Eco Village intentional community, we're trying to live a more sustainable and cooperative urban lifestyle. BVCLT stewards the land underneath like 50 units of permanently affordable housing. It's great. We also steward a learning garden. We're in like Northeast Koreatown. Yeah, and I'll pass it over to Casey.
Yeah, I think it's now 54 if we're counting our new acquisition.
Come
Wow.
through.
Yeah, I forgot to count them. Oh my God, how could
Yes.
I?
Did
So
you say new acquisition as in this has just happened?
it just happened. We closed escrow 2 weeks ago, and we're acquiring another building, so it's gonna go up. But hey, everyone, my name is Casey Ventura. I serve both as a community organizer for BVCOT, and I also serve on the board as a board director, so a regular board member. And yeah, I was introduced to BVCOT right after college, which I may get into a little bit. I think the humorous side of it is a member slash now board member just kept poking at me to come through. Eventually, I just sort of said yes after like years of being like propped to come through, and it's been a
We
great
wanted
experience.
Casey. We wanted Casey.
I have experience now.
I love it. I think that what you're sharing, like just real quick, what you're touching on right there, that this is really a people-led movement, and we are tapping on our friends and neighbors who are, that we share space with to get involved because we trust each other and we know each other. And at the heart of the community land trust movement, that's really what it is. We're trying to empower our neighbors and our friends with the decisions to take control of our living situation and take that power out of the hands of developers or property owners or wealthy folks, because folks like us don't really have a lot of those shots, a lot of the time. But I do want to get in a little bit more about like Beverly-Vermont Community Land Trust, maybe like a little bit of the origins of the organization, and then how both of y'all ended up in this space organizing. I know you mentioned a little bit, Casey, but like, I know there's a lot more nuance that we went through. So whoever wants to go first.
I can take a first stab. So Bbclt, as I said, was founded by the LA Eco Village Intentional Community. We really believe in the holistic definition of sustainability. We want to live more sustainably, more in harmony with the natural environment, but also we know that social and economic justice is part of a true sustainability, and that the movement to, create a better way of living that doesn't wreck our planet has to be led by the very people who are going to be most impacted by the terrible effects of climate change. So that is sort of like the vision, I guess, purpose of Bbclt. I personally got involved in CLTs because I actually went to a random remote island off the coast of Washington State and interned for a community land trust, and was just like amazed by the really positive effects that it has on stabilizing community, providing stable housing and ownership opportunities for people who would never be able to dream of owning their own homes under the system that is the mainstream right now. So I got really excited about that. I've been a renter my whole life. Like, I've lived in this rent-controlled apartment my entire life in K-Town, and I just really got excited about that, possibility of going from renter to owner, but not just that, but like creating opportunities for cooperative ownership, because Newtown is very renter oriented. We're like 93% renters. And I know, there are neighbors in my apartment who've known me since I was a baby, like literally an infant, a 3-month-old infant. My manager, I know people don't like their property manager sometimes, but my manager lives next door, and she's seen me since I was like a wee little child. And like when I get locked out, I'm just like, oh God, please let me in. And there's like a community in our apartment of long-term tenants, and like I would like us to one day cooperatively own our apartment. Hopefully there's no risk of displacement that forces us to band together, but it's really about creating a positive vision of what can be possible, and expanding the definition of property ownership. So yeah, that's why I'm involved. I'm super excited to be here. Met lots of really cool people like Matt and Casey doing this work. So I'll pass it over to Casey.
Yeah, I think to maybe add a little bit more of the 101 of how Bbclt is founded. So Bbclt sort of came out of birth of another organization called CRISP. And CRISP was an organization that sort of was an incubator of 2 more organizations. So we're actually tied to 2 organizations. So CRISP is our founder, which is now the Los Angeles Eco Village Institute. So they do some of the education session, and then around after the Rodney King uprisings, the organization had the opportunity to buy property in Koreatown, and that was 2 buildings on Bimini Place, which is what is now has been created as the Eco Village, and that were sort of both the us 2 housing cooperatives, or Urban Soyo Tierra Urbana, and the Beverly-Vermont Community Land Trust. And so the idea was for the members who lived on this property to own the buildings, and for the land trust to own the land. That way it's a lot more affordable to own the properties. And then there's also, and I think as land trusts are operated through a ground lease, that does leave stipulation to keep it affordable, to really target the needs of the community. So I think Audrey spoke to Koreatown being a renter-heavy community. It's also a BIPOC-heavy community. So the majority of folks in Koreatown are Latino, Latina, Latinx. And then it's also Asian American Pacific Islanders, the following demographics. And so that encompasses a lot of demographics, both not just like racially, but ethnically, right? So like when my parents first immigrated to the United States, they were first in Central City, so the MacArthur Park, Koreatown area. So like they shifted from like apartment, and my mom had one, prior to meeting my dad, had one child, and then they had two more child, which is my older brother and me. So we went from like one bedroom apartment to eventually finding like a house in South Central. So yeah, so like when I think about just like origin stories, I have like a little bit of a heartfelt piece for the area, because every time I go to the Eco Village, like the famous Tommy's is where my dad used to love to be like every weekend. I personally do not like Tommy's. I also don't eat meat anymore, but yeah, it does bring like a little bit of like childhood memories to be in the area and just be like, this is very heavy. I am scared of getting, it's a dense community. So, but that also lives opportunity to meet a lot of people. So I do remember going to a lot of like fairs. How I got involved with Bbclt. So I graduated, college, and I worked for a nonprofit in Inglewood. And one of my colleagues there, who actually just joined, she knew that I was looking for housing at the time. And she's like, hey, would you consider like the Eco Village? And I'm just like, what is the Eco Village? So then there was the explanation of the intentional community. What is a community land trust? I didn't go through the process. Part of it was I also was scared of leaving home at the time. And also,
that's fair.
So as I sort of like left the organization, I began to do a lot more tenant organizing. And I think that's sort of what also gained my interest in community land trust, where, in tenant organizing, a lot of the work, a colleague would describe it as policies as a shield, like fighting for the shield, where a lot of tenant organizing is about creating tenant protections, rent stabilization ordinance, rent control, or even just fighting for folks to win eviction cases.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily redefine the relationship between a tenant and landlord.
Yes.
And remove that hierarchy where a tenant has a lot more powers in their living situation. So when another land trust was sort of being incubated and formulated in research, I got a lot more information about CLTs, foundings, what they're really about, and it really addressed that heart of the issue of how do you redefine that relationship between a tenant and their landlord, which the CLT was very much putting more control in community, while also adding like affordable measures. So I was initially inquired, like, would I be interested in serving on the Bbclt board around the same time Audrey was. I had initially declined just like based on my organizing experience. And then when this position came up, I was asked, hey, would I be interested? I'm like, sure, let's just like throw in some documentation,
And that's the story of how we finally got to
finally caught the big fish.
Yes, and so, and I think for folks to contact, because we're the first employees, it was very much about, I think the interest was like really building out a membership and organizing program this year, because Bbclt has been volunteer ran for like since 2007, 2008.
Wow.
So yeah.
See, I didn't see. I think that we mentioned that when we were doing prep work yesterday, but it didn't really click for me that Bbclt has been community led, volunteer run, and this is like one of the first times that y'all have paid staff, right? And that's why, like, one of the things that we're talking about here is also like we need to broaden the base of who understands CLT work. Like, what is CLTs? Is it for you and all this and that? Because, at first it sounds very maybe intimidating, like I only learned about CLTs from my trade tech classes in like August 2019. And now it's like, it's almost been 2 years later. But the thing is, like, the thing about CLTs is this sort of structure or organizing structure of housing has been around for a long time, and not just here in the US, but worldwide. And so what we're doing is we're tapping into our ancestral knowledge and like knowledge from all over the world to really restructure what we think is kind of missing here in the US configuration, right? And Audrey, I just want to hear more because like as a lifetime resident of Koreatown, like can you speak more to why you think CLTs are important or situated for K-Town, and what that could what kind of possibilities could be unlocked through community stewardship of Koreatown?
Right. The community land trust model is just so flexible. Like it just can be applied to a lot of different like objectives, or a commercial community land trust, or housing land trust. Obviously, in the U.S., CLTs really were like originated from the Black farmers movement, who were trying to, like take ownership of the land. And because they were obviously disenfranchised and had a lot of obstacles to like buying and purchasing land in the traditional capitalist market, they wanted to create like a cooperative, like where they could partner with like several other farmers to collectively purchase the land and steward it under like a common entity, and be able to use that land without fear of being displaced or being kicked off, or like being relegated to like sharecropping. But that's the history of it. For Koreatown specifically, I just feel like there are so many opportunities. Koreatown is very much populated with small businesses. A lot of them are Korean American merchants who had to start their own businesses because they, like, banks weren't willing to, employers weren't willing to like hire them. So a lot of these old timer, like first generation small business owners who've been in the neighborhood for 30, 40, 50 years, like they are now being displaced by Sweet Green and like all the Howling Rays, like different like chains that are like coming into Koreatown because there's so much capital investment here right now. I think stabilization of a commercial property is like a really key objective for CLTs in Koreatown. But right now we're focused on the housing movement because there's also a lot of housing insecurity. Homelessness in Koreatown has been skyrocketing. There were like 500 people living on the streets of Koreatown before the pandemic. We don't have a homeless count like post-pandemic yet, so we don't know how much those numbers have increased. I've done like research and like really interviewing people who are of Korean descent experiencing homelessness, because the whole minority myth prevents us from recognizing that homelessness and housing insecurity affects everyone, not just not just like the people who are experiencing mental illnesses who are the most visible, but and like sort of shape that narrative, like sort of that public perception of homelessness. But yeah, so Koreatown like experiences a lot of housing insecurity, and yet like as most immigrant, I think all immigrant communities are in the U.S., there's a lot of like camaraderie, solidarity. There's a lot of like community that is organic. It just like has developed because of necessity, because we're out here. Our parents were out here in like the wild west of like not knowing English, but like finding their people and like forming informal social networks that also like supported each other. Like I think that would ring true with a lot of immigrant communities. And I think that like already built-in community really lends itself well to the community land trust model, where you agree that you want everyone's housing to be affordable, or you want all the legacy businesses in the neighborhood to be able to stay, because they're the ones that created the culture of Koreatown, that created the attraction of Koreatown, and now they're the ones who are at risk or already have been getting displaced out of Koreatown, priced out of Koreatown. So I just think there's a lot of really good potential for community land trust, that like a lot of like it's not just like a radical reimagining of like land and ownership. That's like what we're excited about in this space, but it just makes sense. Like it just makes practical sense. Like if you think about like all the holistic like interconnections that support our economy, that support our society, I'll just stop there and ask if Casey has anything else to say.
I, I mean, the thing that sort of came up in my head, and I think it's just like the uniqueness of Koreatown as a community itself, right? Where in comparison to some of our peers in other land trusts, like there is ethnic enclaves of different sort of origins in Koreatown, which also reflect different needs within different demographics and groups. So just the model of a community drive to having that basic requirement of community leading it, just even like by the very nature of our board structures being the one to drive the land trust, also drives to the needs of each sort of like individual, each sort of like population's needs and requirements. Like there are similarities across different demographics. I mean, again, housing is across the board something everyone needs, but also I think Audrey really gave a good explanation of like economic like recovery, particularly right now,
Yeah.
or just even access to basic things of the human. Like we often talk about how Koreatown is a park poor community and requires more green space, and that is a way that community land trusts can lend that, like really
Yes.
facilitate that process of providing green space or managing the land of green space. So BVCLT does steward the land of a learning garden for the community to utilize, and so that is like for a community that's highly dense is unique. There's also like we do also like facilitate the land of a, you know, it started off as a bike shop, now it's sort of like an event space. It had Relampago Wheelery has a personality that I really appreciate, but you know, it really did fit the needs of the folks who live there. So I think I would just add to that point, just like how, or more reiterate, just like the flexibility of how land trusts, particularly in Koreatown, can look like.
I am listening to y'all and just thinking about so many things that like throughout the whole thing, like when Audrey, you were talking about preserving ethnic enclaves, you know, like due to COVID, we've seen like the rapid attack and gentrification of Chinatown and Little Tokyo. And through our partners out there, I've been learning about all of these legacy businesses going up in smoke. And folks are lucky if they're able to relocate within their little ethnic enclave, but more likely than not, these businesses are disappearing forever. And these are the labors of love that immigrant folks had come to the United States and put together. And you know, like just think about the history of this city, of the segregated, racist like policies that have driven this city, right? Like I used to live along Crenshaw, and the Japanese American Community Credit Union is situated there. And how did they get started? Because no banks would give access to financial tools to immigrant people. And so immigrant and people of color had to come together to service ourselves, to build up our communities ourselves. And then when things get popping, of course, the little Christopher Columbuses want to come in and capitalize on our stuff. But and not to like be a little spicy about my words, but literally like the whole idea of cooperative economics and solidarity economics is rooted in the immigrant experience here in the United States. And what we're providing or working through like community land trust is a way to bring that solidarity and cooperation into our housing space or our land use space, spaces that are highly commodified and commercialized. And so, of course, folks like us, when we don't have a lot of income or like, you know, access to that stuff, it's harder for us to protect our ethnic enclaves from like, you know, Blackstone or whatever like these developers are. But we do have the tools available to us so that we can preserve our ethnic enclaves and let other people know just how awesome it is to be able to go to Koreatown, to Chinatown, to Little Armenia, or wherever we're at, and to experience fully and authentically the richness and diversity we bring to the table, right? Not so that's just me ripping off that, but like it's so powerful to see how community land trusts can be a tool to preserve ethnic enclaves, legacy businesses, and all of these things that are under attack, that have been under attack, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so maybe, and also Casey, you were bringing up another point, which that some of the spaces that BVCLT has held has evolved in different ways to serve the needs of the community. And I think Koreatown particularly has shown that there is great appetite for organizing and for supporting each other's folks. I remember first hearing about K-Town for All and like all these other organizations coming together to support each other. Yeah, and so like this is an amazing opportunity because folks are here demanding that we reorganize the structure or like the orientation of Koreatown to be able to serve everyone. And like what we have right now are the tools to do it. And we hope that more folks, thank you again for joining us on all this, for learning about how like you can get involved and how we can expand this knowledge and how we can reach other people to start thinking about organizing organizing our neighborhoods in terms of solidarity and cooperation. So I think one of the things, of course, like we're here on TOPA Tuesday to talk about TOPA, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. And both of y'all have mentioned about this in your stories of, you know, your personal stories. How would a tenant opportunity, like, first of all, can someone quickly explain the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, and then maybe just talk about how that would play out for Bbclt and Koreatown and what that would mean for a community that's 93% renters and mostly immigrant people of color?
I can try to feed that bird of answering what TOPA is. So yeah, an expression I've learned rather than say kill two birds with one stone, it's feed two birds with one hand.
I love that.
Aww.
Let's do it.
Cool.
So I think in TOPA, tenant opportunity to purchase that. So like in basic bullet point definition is giving tenants first right of offer and first right of refusal. So meaning tenants being the first one to have an offer to purchase a building if their building, be it a single family home, duplex or multi-unit building is up for sale. And then if, you know, it's not market rate or if there's no opportunity, they also have the right to refuse the first offer to give them opportunity, right? So I think about tenants of the building we first acquired, the building we acquired maybe 2 weeks ago. So we just acquired this building where some of these tenants have lived here their entire lives. They're mostly from time like immigrating from Mexico. Some tenants have been here 2 decades, 10 years, and they got to know each other. They built community in this building, right? And they've seen a couple different owners, and eventually they got I would just call them a slumlord, where this owner would, you know, not take their rent checks or lose them out of nowhere. So the rents weren't available. They took one of the tenants to court. They offered one of the tenants cash for keys. And eventually they put up their building for sale. So what these tenants did is that they organized to not allow anyone to view this building to make an offer. So they put up signs. They made it difficult for people to come inside the building and inspect it in order for Bbclt in particular to come in and make an offer and really entice the owner to sell to the land trust so they can form a cooperative and be the owner. So it worked. The building is now under, you know, our possession, but in a TOPA sort of process, the tenants would have been the first one to be able to make an offer, right? And they wouldn't be able to just work with the land trust to make that offer and find that financial means, right? You know, we talked about doing an intent to sue, doing like rallies, like really creating noise, where the reality is it should not be this difficult for folks to keep home because this owner was already talking about redeveloping the building and, you know, displacing the tenants there in order to create a more market rate or even high luxury apartment in Koreatown, which is what we're seeing a lot more. So like a TOPA and a city level would look like descending having that opportunity to make that first offer, right? And really have just like a legal opportunity standing to keep their building rather than having to create like a fight, which is traumatizing, right? Like I've worked with tenants who are still processing just like the traumas and the pains of going to potentially be in this place or being displaced. So even that process does have a weight that does require a lot of things to like heal from. So, you know, that should not be the case just to keep stable housing.
Yeah, I think you described it perfectly through the case study of Kenmore, but there just isn't like a space where tenants, like especially long-term tenants who, if given the opportunity, would be very much interested in being able to legally own the homes that have become their homes for the past 10, 20, 30 years. There's no opportunity, there's no like institutionalized structure for that to happen right now. Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA, is not a new idea in the US. DC has like the longest running TOPA program in the country. And it essentially is a legal right where if a landlord decides to sell the building that they own, legally speaking, the tenants should be given the opportunity, literally tenant opportunity to purchase the building together. And I'm like going to be going to law school in the next whatever time, like hopefully like next year, and like it just makes sense. It is bringing a whole new set of actors to the real estate market, and this new set of actors, the tenants, like there's no like moral hazard, like there's no like incentive for them. There's no incentive for them to like let the building like fall apart because they live in it.
Yeah.
And they've been living in it for a long time most of the time if they're organized enough to like want to cooperatively purchase their home. So it's literally creating a window of opportunity. It's slowing down the speculative process so people can't like flip housing left and right. It's creating like this space where nonprofits like Bbclt and like the other community land trusts of the LACLT coalition can like propose this as like a solution of like stewarding the land for permanently affordable housing, because how like God knows that we're in deep shortage of that in the city. So yeah, like Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, it's really like pushing into like formalizing this sentiment that I think a lot of people share, that like if you live in a place and it's your home, like there should be some level of rights that come with it. And like it's going back to what Casey was saying earlier, like it can't just be like trying to prevent the bad things. Like, it can't be just like trying to prevent like slumlord behavior. It has to be more forward thinking. It's a more positive vision of what that relationship could look like and how we can protect that and steward that and promote that. We want more people who are living in apartments for a really long time, and they're not the like students who like, oh, they're like renters for now, but they're going to move elsewhere, so they don't want to be owners of the building that they own. That's fine. But there are lots of people who have been living in their homes for a very long time and have never had the opportunity to purchase. Like we could get into a lot of details about like why this has happened, including like stagnant wages, like redlining back in the day. Like it's just like it goes on and on and on back into the history books of like why we see such inequality in wealth between like certain groups. So yeah, I'll start rambling. But the Opportunity to Purchase Act, like it is literally the first step in creating or reforming or radically changing the housing market to promote good outcomes that anyone would look at and be like, okay, yeah, we want more communities. We want more communities to be able to be stabilized.
Yeah, and I think there is an important like distinction. It's opportunities. It's not even force. It's kind of like even asking the bare minimum. We just want the opportunity to purchase our homes, not we demand it. So it's not even like a demand. It's like, can we have this ability? And like when I think about even just like the density of the community, it is a lot of apartment units. It's not like folks are asking for single family homes, or there aren't many single family homes in the area. You are literally asking for a unit within an apartment building and maybe some of the shared spaces. So it's, when I think about it from that perspective, it's just like, folks are deserving of dignified living and being outstanding in their living.
Yes.
And this is, I make a joke, this is like step 1 of 300, but this is really just like, we're asking for step 1 of 300.
Yo, and that's the big thing because we're not again like what the TOPA does is it's not even a guarantee. It's just we are demanding that people look at tenants in the eye through this process and come to us when the building is being sold or this and that, because at the end of the day, like people treat low income tenants like we don't even matter. Like they sell like folks sell buildings left and right without telling us until we know that there's a rent increase or something like that. And the TOPA policy really is just, hey, negotiate in good faith with the people who live here. And it's not, and we're not undercutting the selling process or anything. We're asking for fair market value. We just want a shot to be considered and to go for fair market value. And if it works out, it's great for us. And if it doesn't, it's great for you. But we're asking for a fair shot. That's really all it is. And I feel like in this country, that's really all, like immigrants, like, and low income folks who are like, who come to this country, that's all people are asking for, just a shot at making things happen. And, you know, like, I know, like, you know, my parents' origin stories and all this stuff, like, it's really all about that. Like, yeah, I don't want to talk too much about that, like, model minority stuff, but literally, we all we want is a fair shot. And what more, like, what more powerful way than to come together as a community to demand this and to uplift each other than through a Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act and through the perpetual stewardship of affordable housing through a community land trust, which is owned and governed by the people who live there. Isn't that right, board members?
Absolutely.
Do y'all, I mean, like, this is so powerful, and I think this is really interesting. If folks have any questions to Casey and Audrey, I hope that y'all can pop them in the comments or reach out to them at bbclt_LA, right? That's your Instagram?
Yes,
Yep.
I forget a lot of the time, but yes.
Well, you know, you can find all of our partners here at the TOPA for LA website. You can go to our website, which is pinned below, topa4la.org, to find out more about the policy and more about all the coalition that we've built to bring this piece of policy to fruition. We're also asking that folks here get involved. You know, there's a petition, sign the petition. If you're in an organization or a neighborhood group and you want us to present and speak to you about community land trusts and the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, please reach out to us and do so. We're happy to do this. We're happy to talk to you and to spread the knowledge. Again, like our movement is going to be led by us, you know, bringing in our neighbors and our friends into this movement, not by entrusting that some developer is going to do the right thing. We need to demand accountability every single day. And we need to, and we can start that by making these terms that we're using, these acronyms, CLT, TOPA, all these different things, we can make that less scary by just talking to our friends and family and educating folks on it. So please visit our website, get involved, reach out, talk to, come to our meetings. I know BVCLT has meetings. When are they?
So we have monthly meetings. Our next meeting is July 7th, approximately. So yeah, so we have monthly meetings where we just like give updates on what has the org been doing and, you know, really direct us in our work, right? And or get involved in one of our 100 committees that we operate internally. It's not 100, yeah, but there are a lot of committees that really, you know, steward the functions of BVCLT, right? So, you know, it's there are folks like Audrey who just had an interest in, you know, acquisitions and ecological sustainability. So she, you know, she joins those committees and manages them very well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, like there's also opportunity just to get involved in just like our acquisition work, our organizing work, and even like getting more folks involved, or even like
Our cooperative development work.
Our cooperative development work. So I mentioned like our Kenmore case. So right now we meet with them every other month to support and them becoming a housing cooperative where they will be the owners of their building, right? So that is our goal. We don't want to keep the building. We want to transition ownership. So it's really working with them to understand a conflict resolution policies. What are the things that are required to manage a building? like both like repairs and upgrades, but also like budgeting, like really train those skills up. So and then the transitions to them is like they are the owners, they maintain the buildings, they know what to do, and they are also interested in like pushing on this model to other buildings, right? Because they're like, this is a new way of understanding, like just, I was going to say it in Spanish, like housing. Why not pass it on to other tenants like them? Because for a lot of the tenants they mentioned, like this is an opportunity of ownership they didn't think they ever get.
Ever.
So that is like, we have a co-op where we create that curriculum that we hope to share. So like other buildings may, other, tenant associations may be inspired to do this work.
Absolutely. So I know we're running up on time right now. Let's see. We had just got a question. Are there CLTs that exist as community spaces beyond housing, like gardens, cannabis growing spaces?
So I think like there are, I don't know, Audrey, if you want to take a shot at it after me, but like CLTs do not just exist for housing. Like I mentioned, we also facilitate like a learning garden specifically just for like education purposes of the gardening and CLTs. And we also do it for a business, which is Relampico Wheelery, which again, it's an event space. So I haven't seen one that's specific for cannabis growing. It is possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I just haven't seen it personally. But that is a way that a CLT can operate to manage that sort of like business. I don't know, Audrey, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, the LA Neighborhood Land Trust, I think, is specifically for parks. But I think there are examples all across the country. I have also not seen a cannabis like farm oriented CLT, but I think that would be a great application if there are people who want to pursue that. A community land trust is essentially like can be in many forms legally speaking, but the most common form is a 501c3 nonprofit where in the bylaws, like in the mission of the legal entity, like you can set that to whatever it is, and it's usually permanently affordable housing, but definitely ecological sustainability or conserving land. There's a lot of community land trusts that are actually in rural areas of the country where they were seeing all this rapid development and they wanted to preserve their agricultural resources. So that's what we like incorporated the land trust to do. There are community land trusts that have risen out of disasters, like natural disasters, like post like Katrina, post Hurricane Harvey. So CLTs are really like trying to preserve land, not for speculation, not for profit making, but like value creation, like real like value creation of like, oh, we want to preserve this so people can permanently have affordable housing here. So yeah, it's super flexible. Love the model.
And I just want to add a couple of things. I feel like a CLT would go great with a worker-owned cannabis collective as a form of like racial and equity justice. Like, like we're talking about like an industry that is being capitalized upon by white corporations while like Black and brown people languish in jails. And so I feel CLTs would be a perfect application for a worker co-op owned cannabis collective of some sorts. And I think that would be a great way, Let's see, I think cultivating cannabis would generate lots of funds to support the affordable housing efforts. I mean, that and also worker ownership. Some of the other things I do want to, like another shout I wanted to say, although it's not a community land trust per se, but Mercado La Paloma is an example of how like economically spaces can be preserved for the community. I remember the first time I went to that space and I was blown away. It looks like every other bougie open market type space that I've been to, but it was literally housing local indigenous entrepreneurs and providing space and technical assistance to help people become successful at their craft. And that is something that we can do. We can continue to support each other in these spaces and these efforts to become sustainable and like autonomous economically, like green space, housing, anything that we see. So and then lastly, just one last shout out. Audrey, I know you said you had learned from a CLT in Seattle, like off the coast of Washington State. Since it's Pride Month, I was looking up queer, CLT, and the first thing that came up was Queer the Land in Washington State, a CLT that has just bought a 12-bedroom house, and is providing a whole new sort of ecosystem for living and for queer space and queer rejuvenation and rematriation of the land and all of these different things. And so, like, again, like all these words, they sound kind of like, what the hell is that? Yes, that's a good question. That's a great question. And Google is free. We're here. We're here to help. Look into it. No, like, normally when I say Google is free, it's kind of passive aggressive, but also like Google is free. Like, look into it. Be curious about it, and then come join us. Come talk to us. Come to our meetings. Share space. Break bread. Organize with us, and hopefully with your support and with the growing need for the things that we're talking about, the CLT movement is going to take off in LA. And we are going to be the main players here when it comes to housing, equity, and justice. So, do you guys have anything? Do y'all have anything to say that y'all want to add, or things you want to plug before we let the folks go?
Yeah, I think I want to add two things. First, in terms of like cooperative development, some of our board members are involved with the LA Co-op Lab, Los Angeles Co-op Lab, where their primary focus is to create worker-led businesses and economic opportunities. And, I know one of the project officers has mentioned like weed being something of an interest that has come up, and turning that into a worker self-directed like organization, and really looking at it from a regenerative economic standpoint, not just extracting economics and being profitable, but how does the supplies, the profit really go back to the community, not just the business, but the community. Yeah. So, plug in LA Co-op Lab. The other layer to it is, I talk about our Kenmore tenants who are out there hosting a fundraiser this Saturday at 108 South Kenmore at 6 p.m. to start raising funds for they dream of having a garden on their space. So they are doing a fundraiser. So if you're in the Koreatown area, want to play la carne asada or veggies, Ernesto Rivera is going to do some poster signing, pull through. Bring your cash, bring your rich friends. If you know Bill Gates.
If you know Mackenzie Scott.
There we go.
Audrey, is there anything you want to say or plug before we close this out?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention how supportive this movement is. Becoming a board member of Bbclt in 2019, I was literally just finishing up my last year in undergrad, and just didn't know anything about real estate, but everyone is so helpful. I call or email CLTs all across the state of California, and if I wanted to, I could probably call CLTs elsewhere too for support. Just for random questions, everyone's very generous because we all have shared core values of what we want to see, what kind of world we want to live in. I'm especially excited for our younger generation, learning about CLTs, because this is the world that we have to live in. And learning from our elders in the community land trust space and the co-op general solidarity economy space to really create the world that we want to live in. So yeah, we can be happier. So we honestly really welcome anyone who wants to learn more, get involved, create your own thing related to CLTs and co-ops.
I think there's this notion that folks are experts. Really, no one knows 100% what they're doing, and we're all collectively learning together. So I think even just I think real estate, I came at this thinking Audrey was a real estate expert, and I still think Audrey is a real estate expert. But I've learned through that journey with her and our colleagues.
Yes, that's something we're not by any means industry experts, but through this process of learning together and fighting for each other, with and for each other, we are becoming our own experts, and we are applying our own lens of justice and values into the spaces that we inhabit, right? And so the learning curve for me this past 5 months has been incredible, but it's also shown me that it's possible. And so thank you again, Audrey and Casey of Beverly-Vermont Community Land Trust. You can visit them on Instagram at bbclt_LA. You can also check out our website in the pinned comment, topa4la.org, where you'll learn more about all of our organizations. You'll access all of our resources, from our presentations to our videos, and you'll have some action items. We have a petition going around. We're asking for endorsements, and we are seeking to present to different neighborhood groups so that we can continue this outreach effort, and so folks can become more well-versed with the language that we're speaking about. And so please, like this, there is no better time than now to get involved and to spread this word. And I'm not gonna lie, I think we're a pretty cool bunch of folks, and we wanna be with you. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. This will be posted on our IGTV, on our Instagram, and we will also be uploading it on YouTube. Thank you again so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.